Welcome back to Rockers Beer Review. This is part 2 of our interview with King Rat guitarist Matt Bono, telling us all about the time his band supported Marillion. Now, we've had, if you've seen part 1, we had a bit of background about the band. Matt told us the time when he was, he played with Fish as well. But we're really here to talk about that gig at the Cambridge Cambridge Junction. I always get mixed up. It's Cambridge Corn Exchange is a different venue, is it?
Yeah, the Corn Exchange is bigger, I think. It's a bigger theatre, and the Junction's one of those kind of, I think, quite a nice venue. It's like about 800, 1,000 people, so it's quite intimate, but still big enough, certainly for us as a new band, to feel like it's a big stage.
So we talked about a little bit about the, obviously the build up to the band, how you sort of came about supporting Marillion, and obviously this is just a one gig. I'm going to go out with a big question, to begin with. I want to know, did you get any money for doing this gig? And or was there any sort of, did you have a backstage that was full of, beer and champagne that you could sort of indulge in, after you'd done your gig?
Yeah, we were able to retire after that one gig, I think, as I recall it, they did pay us a couple of £100. So, we covered our expenses. It wasn't a lot, but, we were fans and we wanted to do the gig. So so they covered our expenses, paid us a little bit of money. I don't remember. They didn't ask us what the rider was, so we didn't get the chance to write in and say we want M&Ms, but with all the red ones taken out or anything like that, or some of the crazy things that people ask for. But we did get a changing room, and we had bit of space, but I'm sure I'm sure there was something there. There's some refreshments and things, so it definitely felt like a step up from the kind of gigs we were used to playing anyway when we got there. And they had a professional crew there, and yeah.
Did you have any sort of road? Because obviously when your first sort of more heavy metal band, I suppose you would call it, back in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, I sort of did a bit of roadieing for you. Did you have any sort of other people there to help you set up or anything?
Yeah, this is terrible, isn't it? My memory of whether we had, I think, not really. No, I think, like, as I recall, maybe some of the people's partners came with them from the band. Like maybe the bass player's girlfriend was there with us. I think maybe, but I don't think we had we didn't have a roadie. I mean, in an earlier, we talked a bit about the first version of the band where my friend from university, Dickie Blench, the famous Dickie Blench, used to play bass, and he invariably had his mum roadieing for him because he couldn't drive at the time. I don't think he's got a driving license now because he's a Londoner through and through. So he didn't want to, have the hassle of having a car. So his mum used to give him a lift and help carry the amp out. And they had a couple of his early girlfriends were quite muscly. They could carry his bass cab out of the car for him while he kind of wandered around and acted the rock star. But no, by that point he wasn't in the band, and it was our friend Guy was the bass player in the band, and he no, I don't think we had any roadies, so we were still lugging.
You did all the lugging and all the rest, all of that. So Did you have a sound check or anything then? Or?
We did get a little sound check. Yes, we did, because we were, in the end, we did have to set up our own drums and everything. Because when we had this thing where at one point we weren't sure if we were going to have the space to set up the full band, and I said, "Well, can we not use the drum kit that's there? Use Mosley's kit?" And the sound man just kind of looked at us and says, "No, you can't use Mosley's kit." So we had to set up our own drums, and then obviously, yes, so he did have to do a sound check and for that to get the sound right. And actually, the sound, I don't know who would have been doing the sound for Marillion at that time, but it was good. Again, they knew what they were doing, or the feedback anyway from the audience, because you never can tell when you're on stage. You get a very different sound. And
I suppose when you sound check, it's an empty venue, and
yeah, exactly. So the sound guys will do, like, a sound for the venue. They'll put on an album they know, and then they'll just kind of EQ the venue, and then they'll kind of, the guys who know what they're doing know what it's going to be like when people are in there. But on stage, your sound is very much, you've got wedge monitors that you're hearing, so you each get your own mix from. And as I recall, Angus the singer would have had an in-ear monitor that he used, so everyone has their own level set on stage. So often you get a very different impression of what the sound is like on stage than what it is out front. So you've got to trust that the sound man knows what they're doing. But I think they did on that occasion.
So I suppose at this point, before we talk about the meeting the band themselves, the actual gig when you played. Can you have you got any sort of strong memories in terms of how you went down? Was there many people there watching you because obviously you were the support band. I know we've had this discussion before, and I always think that support bands now, they don't, they're a little obscure. Not as many people watch them, but maybe back then it was different. So just let me know. Just give us a background in terms of when you came on. It must have been quite sort of, are there going to be people there watching us, or are they all going to be at the bar, sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd been to gigs in the past where record company bands are, they normally, it's the label puts somebody on that they're trying to break, don't they? Normally as the support act, so it's like a new band that's coming through, or sometimes you get gigs where older bands have come out, but I've definitely been to a lot of gigs as a just as a punter to go and watch the gigs where people went to the bar, not everyone came in, the audience was the venue was half full and people were just chatting and whatever. So yeah, we didn't really know what to expect, and I remember being very excited but apprehensive about going on stage and thinking this is our chance to show people. But we were really, really pleasantly surprised, and it really did, basically the venue was full and everyone really did pay attention to us. They really were keen to see the support bands and to see what they were like. And we were so grateful to get just to have the attention of an audience who definitely did want to see what we were like. And they got into us, and we got a really good response from the audience, both during the gig while we were playing, and when we came off afterwards, a lot of people came up to us and spoke to us. So I mean, it all goes like a blur, really. I can remember standing at the side of the stage getting ready to go on and being really thinking, this is it, we've got half an hour to go and try and impress people. And then the gig itself is like a blur of having a proper professional light rig and everything else, and even trying to remember the songs we played. I can remember roughly which songs, but I'd be hard pushed to say exactly which of our songs we played. But when we came off, it was clear that it had gone down well because we got a good response from the audience. And as I say, and then we did our usual thing of telling everyone that we had CDs to sell and don't forget to buy your CD. And we sold, I think, something like 70 people bought CDs from us on the night. And we had follow-up from it afterwards with people, because we then did another CD, or people wanted the previous CD. So we were really pleased. And I think, I think there is something about Marillion fans that they're not, necessarily all about what the latest fashionable band is. They're genuinely, they're music fans, really. They like, they're into the music. And so I think, they gave all of the support bands, when I've seen, they give them more of a hearing than you perhaps might get at some other gigs, because they were keen to see what they were like, and we seemed to win them over, so it was a really positive experience for us.
And so after that, then did you? Well, let's talk about after the gig. So the first thing, I suppose, the question to ask is, did you get to meet the band?
Yeah, in fact, we met the band a bit before, because when we arrived there, they had their big, it was like, they had one of the big tour buses things outside, which I think when they're traveling, when they're touring, they often stay in the tour bus because they can sleep in there and all the stuff in there. So it means they're not having to hire hotels everywhere. So I think they were in there when we arrived, but then they came in and we got to have a bit of a chat with the band. And I remember, as you'd expect, Steve Hogarth as a singer, he's probably the most outgoing of the band members, and he was really friendly with us, and chatted a bit. And I remember them showing us to our changing area, where we had a backstage area and we could get ready. And I kind of had a wander around, and I found Steve Rothery was in one of the rooms, and I'd been a big fan and I love his guitar playing, and I thought I'd got to go and just say hi and shake his hand and say it's really great to be playing with you. So I thought, will it be all wild rock and roll parties before the gig? But he was in his room, and I might have been doing him a disservice by misremembering it slightly, but in my memory he was reading a catalogue, and I think it was like Screwfix or Tool Station or one of those things, and he was looking at power drills or something. I hope I haven't done him a misservice by misremembering it. Maybe
you sure it wasn't a guitar catalogue that he was looking at, and he was maybe for the latest effects pedal or something?
I know he's into his kit, so maybe that's what I would have thought. But in my memory, I distinctly remember he was looking at power tools or sheds or something like that. Thinking that's not very rock and roll, but there's nothing wrong with that. So I got, had a chat to him, said hello, and actually, it's a funny thing, isn't it, with people that because you've seen them on stage and you'd seen them, in magazines, Kerrang, and all that sort of thing, and so you kind of feel like you know them. And in fact, I'd had a picture taken with me with Steve Rothery a few years before, at one of the venues in London, a small venue where Dream Theater did a set, and they did an acoustic thing, and Steve Rothery and Steve Hogarth, I think, were there and did a song with them. And I'd had a picture of me taken with him and who's the Dream Theater guitarist? John Petrucci.
John Petrucci, yeah.
Yeah. But of course, he wouldn't know that because he must have his photos taken with hundreds of people all the time. Remember him. It's like I remember being at a work book fair abroad and Brian May flew back on the same plane as me. And I saw him. I thought I should go up and say hello to him. But it'd been a long day and he looked a bit tired. He'd been there promoting his book. And I thought, so as I walked onto the plane, I just kind of walked past him and looked at him. Of course, I know who he is, but he didn't have a clue who I was. And it's a strange dynamic with people that but they don't know you. So yeah, we took the opportunity to say hi to them. And I think, we were interested in how they did the technical setup, because we were getting into using things like sampled loops a little bit on some of the keyboard parts. And then you have this issue of how you keep in time with it, because the drummer's obviously playing live and you might have something which is on a sequence on the keyboard, which you've got to stay in time with. And I think at that point, we were asking them, say, do you use some kind of MIDI thing with in-ear things? They just had a big red light that flashed next to the keyboard. And Mosley had to just look at it. I mean, I'm sure that must have changed now, because I think their sound has become sort of more layered and complex in many ways on some of the early recordings. But at that point, that's how they were doing it. So that was interesting. So I remember Angus talking to them, asking them a bit about that. And then before they went on stage, after we'd done our gig, I just remember Steve Hogarth was quite, you could see he was still loved, getting the crowd, the kind of fans, the love you get off of a crowd when you're the singer, especially, I mean, I suppose any band, but he was like, you could see he was ready. And I think he said something, you watch this now for the next 2 hours. I can't do anything wrong, because he was just like, he knew that once he was on stage there. And you can see how our bands, that's a big part of the appeal, isn't it? That you get that 2 hours on stage, or where you just can lap up that adoration of your fans.
Yeah.
So he was definitely still enjoying gigging and that side of it.
Yeah, and I presume that then after they'd come off and you'd finished, were they straight on the tour bus and to the next town, or was there any sort of hanging around and a few drinks? Or
we didn't hang around for drinks with them. No, we didn't. So probably they were heading off for the next one. I remember them saying that, well done guys, that you went down really well, that was really good, but they didn't hang around for long, and we didn't have, so it wasn't like, I think in the last interview we were talking about when we did the Aylesbury gig, that was a lot of hanging around with Fish, and we definitely got to see that Fish was quite a good drinker. He knows how to knock back a few pints, so that was good fun. But yeah, unfortunately we didn't really get to sit down and have a beer with the band, with Marillion.
So after the sort of dust had settled, as it were, I mean, you talked about the sort of good feedback from the audience at the time, and obviously they bought the CD, quite a few bought the CD, which was good. I mean, obviously 2007, as you said, I don't even think Facebook was a thing, but pretty much was about that sort of time, wasn't it? It was still in its early sort of days. But was there any sort of feedback on sort of forums or anything? Was there any sort of stuff that you went away and thought, I wonder if I'm going to get some bands going to approach us, or some fans are going to approach us and maybe sell some more CDs or go to your next gig?
Yeah, we definitely got people emailing us, and we ended up sending out a few CDs that we sold there, and we did get like a stream of positive feedback of people saying they'd really like the show. And then, as I think I mentioned, that Angus, the singer, and I were doing acoustic gigs at the time, and I remember we went back up and did a couple of acoustic shows around the Cambridge area, and we had people come to see us that we didn't know. I mean, we were still at that point, I guess, like lots of bands, where we were playing in London mostly to people that we knew, and we were trying to get our friends along to see us play. And it was noticeable that we did a few shows where we, like there's a couple of acoustic shows around Cambridge where people travelled in, and we were looking and thinking we didn't know these people, and they were there. And then I keep mentioning the gig we did in Aylesbury, but that one thing that really sticks in my mind, that when we played that, it was out in the courtyard, and we played one of our songs, and I looked out and I saw some people who I didn't know singing along or mouthing the words to our songs. And that was a really great feeling that, we're getting to that point now where people who don't know us personally know the songs. And that was a great feeling. You just think how, when you see concerts of bands where there's a huge audience all singing their songs, you kind of take it for granted. But that must be an amazing feeling when that happens. I think, though, for us, it was just, we got great response from the people there, but we did only get that one gig on the tour. And we did feel that if we'd have had perhaps, if we'd have had a whole tour and done all the support gigs, we would have really been in a position to sort of build a fan base from it. But because we just had the one, we definitely got good response there, but it was just the one show. And so we never built up enough of a fan base from that, I think, to really, didn't sort of carry us up to that next level. And then,
was there any sort of press or anything like that reporting of the gig? I mean, I was presume that the press are not always, probably more likely going to be at the London sort of gigs opposed to the sort of the sort of regional sort of provincial towns and cities, basically.
I don't remember us getting any reviews of the gig, actually. No, maybe it was there might have been in local press in Cambridge, I guess, but we didn't. But I didn't see that. The timeline is, I'm not quite sure, because I remember around that time it seemed to be a few things were happening. We did the Aylesbury thing. We also played with Ray Wilson in London, who was the Stiltskin singer who played with Genesis.
I
can't remember if we got that off the back of the Marillion support or if we did that one slightly before. It was certainly around that same time. It might have worked that way. So I think it sort of started to raise our profile a bit, in that we started to notice that we'd see more people who we didn't know at gigs, or had more people might have just heard our name. So a little bit, but it's a tough world out there trying to make it as an originals band in London. And and there's always been a slight thing with the press, I think, about what's fashionable in music and what's not fashionable, and whether what we were doing there was considered a fashionable thing at that time. I mean, it was after Britpop, but it was still, perhaps not the main, what was, in for the music press and the music industry at the time. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you look back on it now, do you think, would you have done anything different, in terms of maybe, utilize this after you, made more of the fact that you'd supported them and maybe followed up with more people? Or, do you think it was, what about the rest of the band? How did they feel it went? Was there a feeling that, this could be your opportunity, and when it didn't quite come, that it was, it was a bit disappointing? Or how was the feeling at the time, or within the few weeks and months after the gig?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think probably everyone really enjoyed the experience, and everyone in the band thought we'd pulled it off. We'd done as good a gig as we could have done, and we'd won the crowd over, and so that'd be good. So I think in terms of the night and the gig, we didn't really have any regrets at all. I mean, I had an email just literally a few months ago from somebody who contacted me and said, I was at your gig you played with Marillion, and I really enjoyed the set. I thought you were a great band, and I see you did a third CD, and could I get hold of the album? And I thought, man, that's like nearly 15 years ago, and somebody still remembered it, and they found us online and said. So I think it was really good. In terms of the follow-up, I just think probably there's for me personally, I would have definitely loved to, if it had been a springboard onto being able to make a full-time living out of being in a band, and we never quite did that. I think probably some of the people in the band had more serious jobs. Sarah was a lawyer, corporate lawyer, and was doing, her career was taking off, and people getting to the point maybe where we weren't like a really young, we weren't all in our like teens or early 20s anymore. We were in, I'm just trying to work out the age, we would have been in our 30s. Yeah, so it was, I think there were a few different tensions in terms of some people in the band probably had we all enjoyed doing it. We all loved doing it. But in terms of how much we wanted to sacrifice, like maybe pursuing, some of the people in the band were, you know, getting to the point where it was jobs were getting a bit more of a pressure on their time, and maybe they were thinking about settling down and families and that kind of thing. So probably, I think, you know, people probably have mixed feelings about whether they, you know, we didn't necessarily all want to be in our 30s becoming a touring band and going out on the road and not doing any of that other stuff, like not pursuing families and, you know, settling down. But I definitely, you know, for me, it's a mixed feelings, because I love the gig and it's a great experience, and I really thought I'm glad I can look back and that we played with Marillion. But of course, personally, I would have loved for it to have led on to more of that kind of thing, and for us to get to do more of that. Like I think we did follow up. We wrote to them and said, do you want us to do some more support slots? We'd love to come and play. But we didn't. So, you know.
No. And do you know of any of the other? Because obviously they had a different band supporting them, you know, throughout the tour. Did you hear? Was any of those bands still going in now, or do you know if they ever got anything from it or anything?
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure, because I think we were so focused on what we were doing, I kind of ignored everything else that was going on with the other bands and the other support bands. I don't think so. I mean, I know there's been bands that they've played with back in the, you know, early days, which have gone on and assigned bands now, but I don't remember any specifically from this tour. I mean, I think it was a great experience for, you know, I think it's a really good thing that, and it's an interesting thing that I don't know if many other bands have done this, of offering unsigned bands, just bands really starting out. You know, I mean, we were in an interesting position in that we were an unsigned band, but we weren't just starting out. We'd been playing. I mean, I'd been playing in bands in one way or another since, well, when we were at school together, really. And although in those days it was very amateur in the early beginnings of it, but we'd had quite a few years of experience of gigging and playing. And I'd kept that up. I mean, I had a few years when I was at university where we didn't gig, but I think actually, even thinking about that, we probably did gig in the holidays and the breaks and things. And then I'd gone up to London in the mid 90s and formed this band at work. So I'd been in one way or another, been playing. So all of us we were quite experienced, you know. But I think some of the bands that they got, they were given support slots, were probably much younger and were starting out. And it's a great, you know, I think more bands could probably look at doing that, you know, especially now when it's all about live, isn't it? And it's so hard for, you know, what we found was on the London circuit, it was really hard to get a crowd of people who didn't know you, because so many bands were playing and it was so saturated, and you got like short, you know, they put 4 bands on in a night. And we did a few like mini tours around, as I say, the Midlands and the North, where some of us in the band knew people. And we definitely found that you'd get more people who would come out to see unknown bands there. And you'd get a better crowd in often, you know, of new people. And I think it's an interesting one, because London and the Southeast is, you know, seen as the place to be, and it certainly was back in the day when it was where all the record companies were. But actually, maybe sometimes you're better off sort of building your fan base in a different area, really, regionally, where you can really build and work on that. So,
so you talked a bit about, you talked a little bit about that you played with Ray Wilson from Stiltskin and obviously in Genesis, and obviously played with. Because you obviously didn't play supporting Fish. We
didn't support Fish. We were like the entertainment for the after show party, which was nice, because we got to play a big long set and we got to meet him and hang out with him. But yeah, it wasn't to the main audience. It was like a VIP selected audience. Was there any other famous bands that you've played with, or? There's not too many. Going back to the early days when we were in Essex, and it was in the band that we were in then, Strange Frontier, which was more of a heavy metal band. I think we did a gig there with, was it the band that was the Choir Boys, but then they kind of relaunched as a new band called God's Hotel or something like that.
Oh, right, yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
We played with them at the Army and Navy.
Did you also play with, I'm having to go back a few years in my memory now. Didn't you play with the band that had a big hit in the 80s, Doctor and the Medics? Didn't you support them as well? I've got this vague memory that you did that as well.
If we did, then my memory is terrible, because but yeah, I'm sure we didn't support Doctor and the Medics, but maybe he played at the Y Club or something when we were there.
That's what I have a vague feeling that they were. because obviously they were just I mean, it wasn't even their hit, was it? They played, but they did get a #1 with that.
Yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? You would have thought I would remember if we had. I remember at the Y Club in Chelmsford, we played with that band Skin, where it was the guitarist from Jagged Edge. Do you remember that? Who was like a minor heavy rock band in the late 80s, early 90s, and we supported them there and got that gig. So, but nobody that you would call really, really big and famous. No, yeah.
So we'll just end with a little bit of a sort of like a quick, a few quick questions, really about Marillion, really for Marillion fans. So what have you ever? You did mention one before, but any other Marillion? What Marillion songs have you covered in past bands?
You know what? We've never covered it, and it's not because I've not like wanted to. It's because every band I've been in, I think there's always been one or two people who've just not really been into the sound of it. You know, so when we were in Strange Frontier, I can't imagine our singer at the time would have been keen on doing Marillion because he was more into the heavy side of things. But so other than the most obscure, as you Now She'll Never Know, that's the only cover we've ever done of a Marillion song.
So in terms of Marillion, you obviously, you know, I know that you're a fan, and we've been to see them together a few times. Do you know how many times you've seen Marillion live?
I think it's probably about 10, maybe a dozen. I mean, I saw them, first time I saw them was the first tour they did with Steve Hogarth, the Season's End tour. And I was trying to think, was that 89 or 90? It would have been around that time, probably 1990, I think. And it was just after, you know, they'd gone there, Fish had split, and they did the solo out. They did their album. Fish did a solo album, and I saw Fish at the Kentish Town and Country Club, now the Forum, or it might be called something else now. But I saw him in, I think that was 89, and Fish in 90. And then the last time I saw him was probably with you in 2017, was it, at Hammersmith? I think we saw them.
That was at London Palladium, wasn't it?
London Palladium, yes, yeah. London Palladium, that's right. After they'd done the Albert Hall gig, but we didn't get to that. But so, and in between, I was trying to think of all the tours I saw them on. Definitely saw them on this Strange Engine tour, and definitely saw them on Marbles and on. And there was a time when they always used to do a Christmas show at the Forum in Kentish Town, and I went to a number of those. So it's probably about 10 times actually.
Yeah. Wow. And in terms of what is your favourite Marillion album?
It's almost impossible, isn't it? Like when you do your top 10 ranking albums, how do you come up with the choice? I think probably, in terms of what I listen to the most, going back and continually still go back to it, I think Marbles I just love Marbles. It's a bit, probably you could cut a couple of songs and make it just a real killer. There's a couple of songs, it just stretches out a bit of a long album. But I just think Marbles has such a really great sound. And the songs, it definitely changed their songwriting a bit after, where they do a lot more soundscapey stuff, where I think the songwriting was really strong on that album. So I do love that album. But I still love the Fish era stuff. You know, I love Fugazi and I love Clutching at Straws, because I think Clutching at Straws was just like where they got to the peak of what they were doing with Fish. And it's like, where could the band have gone with that sound? So maybe Clutching or Marbles, one of those two.
So I suppose even more difficult to ask you what your favourite Marillion song is.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think probably it's the it's like from Marbles. I think Neverland, and actually The Invisible Man. I love The Invisible Man. I think that's a great track. And I think I do like their epic proggy stuff, because I think This Strange Engine is just a brilliant song, you know, and it's not a commercial kind of song, but it's just got some really lovely moments in it. I always really liked Out of This World from Afraid of Sunlight, and actually the song I've lied, we in the acoustic set we did a cover of Afraid of Sunlight as well, and that was a lovely song to do on piano and acoustic guitar, and that is a beautiful song. So yeah, probably. And again, it's interesting because Marillion, when I think of the Fish era stuff, I love those albums. But when you think of Misplaced Childhood, it's hard to pick out a song that is a favourite song, because it's such an album, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, probably one of those.
I think that's the same with like Brave. I think it's a great album, but to pick a favourite song off of it is quite difficult, because it works better as a sort of whole than it does picking out, as individual songs.
Yeah, definitely. And the songs they've had that are hits, like Kaylee or Incommunicado or Hooks in You, are not necessarily most fans probably wouldn't pick them as their favourite songs, but yeah.
And obviously the new album that probably is you've probably heard heard it by now. What do you think of the tracks that you've heard so far from the new album?
I think they're really strong songs, and I think it's great to hear a band that are in, what is this, their 15th studio album or more?
I think it's about 19th, isn't it? I think it's higher than that.
Yeah, and it's really rare to hear a band, I think, that have been around for that long who's still putting out strong material. It always takes a while for me to know whether it's, I have to let it bed in a bit and listen to it for a bit, because I think with Fear, it took me a while. When I first heard it, I thought, not sure about some of this, but it's grown on me quite a bit. So I'll give this a bit more time. But the songs that they put out as like the singles definitely have that. They're quite catchy, actually. They grab you quite quickly. Murder Machines, and So I'm really. I think the sound is great. It's really good to hear them. I think they still do sound pretty fresh, and it's noticeably Marillion. It's got their sound, but they're not just repeating themselves. Not just putting out another album that sounds exactly the same. So yeah, I'm impressed with it. I'm impressed.
And finally, I'm going to have to ask you this: Fish or H?
Grendel. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. They're both such lovely people, but for me, I've got to say again, if I just think what I listen to, probably because they got more material, I probably think H is he's developed the band more, over the years, pushed it in new directions, and I still listen to Fish stuff, and I think Fish has got one or two amazing songs from his solo career. Like, I always thought Credo was just a brilliant single, great lyrics, great sound. But if I was forced to choose, I would probably choose H.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Well, Matt, thanks very much for coming on the channel and telling us about your experience of supporting Marillion. I'm sure there's loads of fans out there that are really interested in hearing all the background of that. Obviously, King Rat are not around as a band anymore, but they've still got a website, and I'll put the link in the description of this video for their website. It's kingrat.net. And there are music samples and songs on there that you can listen to, so you can see what King Rat were all about, and whether you thought that that they're like how we've described them today. Thanks again, Matt, and hope you guys out there you really enjoyed this video. Hopefully we do more of these sort of interview stuff as well. So until the next one, you know what you're gonna do. Matt, take it away.
You gotta keep on rocking.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me on.
Soon.
Cheers, Rocker.
Bye-bye.